Hey everybody, BTO Pro here. Real simple one here. I'm going to show how I use GitHub to interface with our whole project space. Some little tricks, tips for writing in Markdown on GitHub and ways that I kind of manage the chaos. And there's much. And then I'll fix an issue and show how that whole pipeline ends up working out. So, all right, I had this idea. This happens from time to time. I'm drinking a coffee because I'm the world's okayest developer and I have a lot of coffee. So I'm having a coffee and talking to someone, and for whatever reason, flashbulb moment. So I had this vision of this tool where I'm trying to teach people how to learn to write web components. Perhaps you've heard of the idea. And what I'm going to do is I need as an onboarding tool. Okay, so you know what HTML is, you've seen it, you know what CSS is, you've seen it, you're not entirely sure how to stitch this stuff together using JavaScript and all this tooling. So what if I made a microservice, an input field for HTML, an input field for CSS, hell, an input field for properties that you can just say what properties should show up. And as you write that stuff, it's actually ripping that data to a post. That post is going up to a Vercel endpoint. That Vercel endpoint is taking in those totally insecure, like absolutely insecure pieces of data, processing them, and sending back down the wire that full definition, that JavaScript. Then you're hydrating that JavaScript on the front end and then seeing the output dynamically. So you can actually get what that is, taking these two things and piecing them together as a full blown web component. Obviously, you have to throw in the name of the tag or whatever. And then you actually get it written right there and you can see it. You could potentially use it, write your own. They could even be vanilla if you wanted, I guess. So that's the general idea. So I would probably have left panel, right? And on the left panel, and this is a shortcut for like doing a little checkbox thing. So there'd be a code editor. It would also have to have multiple input array for properties. Potentially with types. I don't know that I want to get that sophisticated. Code editor for HTML. Code editor for CSS, right? So I could have those next to each other. Left panel, probably stuff in tabs. So that might be like simple tabs because that's what we actually made. Okay, so then I have multiple input. Obviously, I have to have tag name or randomly. All right, one. That also be important. Okay, and then right now. All right, so you see the rendered output of the dynamically built web components, and you also then need an area as a code editor, so that you can implement said thing you are seeing. Kind of like Storybook, so like on the fly. All right, then I need Vercel endpoints. The Vercel endpoint is going to have to be able to take a post, build a web component, write JS on the fly, send that JS file, air quotes, back down the wire for processing. Probably all it has to do, to be perfectly honest. All right, so had that idea, throw it in there. If it's something that's way out there, that's where I'm probably saying, let's see, this is a microservice. Yep, microservices. This is like a 20, for 2025, future looking sort of thing. That's going to be fun as hell. Love that. It's absolutely a full project, right? So this is a tagging structure that I've made over the years. And then I'm done with it. I'm not going to actually do that one. That's just to get it in there. The idea goes in there. I've had 1,436 of these type of ideas closed out. I can filter by these tags, which is why they're important. You can see all sort of our moonshot sorts of things around like API tracking and private key system hashing and systems that work on their own and all kind of fun stuff. But what I'm going to focus on now is how do we actually go from an actionable issue? I can't solve that one, right? I document that thing. I can't solve that right now. That was an idea. How do I go from that into an actual finished thing? So have this issue. Someone noticed. So we got to hacks at the edu. Log in. Okay, and then we go to sure hack single site. And so this says edit page, and then click it. It says save and save. But sometimes, for whatever reason, I'm not going to be able to get it to do it right now, I bet. Sometimes it doesn't say save, it says save changes. Might actually involve you've saved the page. Yep, there it is. So after I actually saved the page, now it says save changes, when it didn't before. Okay, so that error was reported by someone. I then make an issue and go, hey, let's just make it say save. I don't know why it says save changes. So then I've got a code instance here, and I am in Carvana repo, which is just a big old repo of repos. But it is called LRN Web Components. So the first thing we notice on terminal is, I get that to clear and clear that up, is it says git, it's super dark there, but git, meaning there's a git repo, is on the branch master, and the X implies there's something not in version control yet. So I can type git status, and it says, hey, this file was modified. Now, I could say git add and then type the name of the file, hitting tab to save myself time. That would then stage the commit so that I have said I want to accept and include these changes, whatever they are. I don't actually know what they are. Or I could do git add space hyphen capital A. That says add everything. Now I'm going to do code space period. That's going to open up a VS Code instance right there. And now integrated with VS Code, I have source control. So I can click on the side and see the changes to this file. We can see it probably like this is some API data sorts of stuff. So not anything that humans are using, but the robots, when building documentation and things, can use this. In fact, VS Code with this specific file is able to read off of that file to help give you feedback about how to build your stuff faster. So really useful with GitHub Copilot. But I digress. So what I would say is, let's do git add a, git commit m, and this one's just going to be tooling enhancement. So what this is saying is, it's saying, all right, we have that code. It's part of the code base now. It's a documented change. It has a little tiny message, so in case I ever had to go back and see, oh, when did everything break? Because I'm an idiot. There it is. All right, so what we're looking for is the phrase save changes. So I have modified the files included in my setup. So if we go and look and see, there's a ridiculous amount of files here, right? So I've got API folder, elements folder. I'm just looking at what was on the file system there. But I have said, okay, I only want to find matches in elements /star, which then the star means anything you find, and then any folder within there called src. I have a very specific way of looking at the structure of my own project. So for this, let's just take that off immediately. All right, we see there is one other change there, but I'm going to put that back on. Okay, so this has showed me where the phrase save changes is. Now it shows up in app hacks, and in this case, our editor UI. So let's look at app hacks first. You can see that the phrase save changes is actually pegged to a variable called save changes. And this is part of an internationalization effort. So in order to make front-end web applications translatable, there's a lot of heavy lifting involved. And so this engine, without getting into too much detail about it, is our way of being able to handle translation between different languages. So we could actually translate the entire interface of our system based on seeing the language of the browser of the person accessing. A lot of this is just building in capacity for this, knowing this is going to hit at some point. I believe the Hacks editing interface has some mild support for Spanish and German, perhaps. But I digress. So we see that there's a variable called, in this case, this.t, and there will be dot save changes because this is a object. So it's not actually even used here as I see it. So I could just take that out. Because it's not actually leveraged in that element. It's leveraged in this Hack CMS site editor UI. I can plainly see, okay, there's save changes, then save changes, and then there's stuff that says like this.t dot save changes. So I'm going to guess that this shouldn't change to say save occasionally. And this was actually my estimation before. Now we're getting way in the weeds, probably way ahead of whatever time in which this video is being viewed as far as where it falls in the course. But there is this variable. I'm in an object in the object's constructor. The constructor is where we're going to set these default values. So ignore all of the rest of this, but these are the default values of variables in the object I'm working on. So this.t.save changes. If I go and look at save changes, there's some other things that say, hey, in this case, I see first updated. This is related to lit element. It means that this code is going to run when the element is ready to be visible on the page. There's like a couple microseconds before that is ready because the definition is loading. So it's going to run some other code that I called, and it's going to then include this word, this save changes. Now, yeah, it's just going to say save changes. However, if you are using a different language for your browsing of the internet and usage of this system, or maybe you don't want to use hacks in English, you want to use it in Japanese or whatever, in Russian, whatever additional languages we end up supporting, then this ensures that as this value is being passed around and rendered, it's going to actually say the right thing instead of my initial default value. Now, what the issue actually said is we're going to just change everything from save changes to save, right? Because we have a this.t.save. And the phrase save changes, kind of random as to when that even showed up, to be perfectly honest. So if we look and say, oh, well, this already was sort of breaking with the internationalization effort here, right? It says this.t.save changes equals save. So something in here, in this case, when the responsive size changes, which is what was attempting to be done here, is that it said save changes when you're at full screen. And then if you scrolled in and made it smaller, we would react to that and go, oh, change all the labels to be really short instead of the long form. So let's just get rid of that. Now, we can see in this if loop, you don't have to understand all the context of what is going on here, but right, I have updated, which means when anything changes that we react to as far as a property. Loop through any of those changes. It could be two things changed at once. If the property that change is called responsive size, triple equals means literally equal to. It's just sort of conventional for stuff like this. A string doesn't make a ton of sense to do that way, whereas a number or an evaluation of false or true or null would be very important. So then if the value, right, so property name is responsive size. If the value is in, and I generate an array on the fly, I say XS, SM, or MD, so those are three values in an array. If those values, so of this array, include the value of the responsive size, because it's literally going to evaluate to this dot responsive size. So a user changes the property or the system changes the property. This method runs. It notices this matches. It sees if the value is within these constraints. Then we look at other code and evaluate, are we in an editing state right now? If we are, then the edit text needs a throttle between save and edit based on if you're clicking that button and we're saving or we're editing. But down here we can see, well, edit text is this.save changes or this.edit page. Now, edit page is going to have the same issue as save changes, as I'm finding now. And this is how we sort of pull at one thread and start to solve multiple problems. So I don't want to throttle between those. I want to throttle between edit. Let's find somewhere else where we have this save changes block. Right? Oh, there's another edit. And there's another save changes. Right, so now we've taken all of the save this.t.save changes out of our code, and now we've got edit page lingering around somewhere. Now I still see that it's back on this interface. We'll take it out of that interface. So we go to a submission page. All right, let's go to UI, and we see, oh, okay, there's one call to edit page. Let's get rid of that. And then we have this, which is calling to edit page. Whoops, new just this.t.edit. Sick. So now, this is honestly the nature of web development, especially with working at something at such a large scale. The Hacks project is absurd. So I got a report about one word. I had to pull that thread and find actually there's two of these things that have this problem. Now, the way that I can test this code, and this gets a little specific to the environment in question, but I go git status, right? And I can see that I changed those two files. I run, for our setup, this is not going to work everywhere, but I run yarn run hacks. Yarn run hacks allows us to have a copy of our entire system running locally, and I can immediately see there's a problem of some kind. The problem is that doesn't say anything on the first page load. What the heck, man? Right? So I didn't know that was going to happen, but this is the type of thing and workflow that we're able to then get, right? If I would have just pushed that code up, and God forbid, if I would have just gone on a server and would have live modified it, and the next person comes to the site, it's broken. Or they're going, well, it doesn't say anything. So I don't think it's even, let's see if it's a responsive design issue. No, it doesn't appear to be. There is just no default state for that. Awesome. So let's go and find where these variables are used, right? So nothing uses the phrase this.edit page, this.t.edit. Let's see where that is everywhere. There's this edit text variable. Let's see. Okay, there's a label. That's going to be applied to this button. It's called edit. And edit text initially is set to nothing. Seems kind of problematic. All right. Edit text is going to change when edit mode changes. It's theoretically possible that the edit mode changes before this code doing the detection of the edit mode changing runs. How do I know? I don't fully. We'll see if that's what it is. So, all right, constructor. All right, so let's set edit text. And now this is not in keeping with the way the translation thing's supposed to happen, which sucks, but let's just say edit. And now another fun aspect of modern local development tooling is, you didn't notice it right there, but I'll refresh again. When I hit refresh on any file that is currently in scope of this running thing in the background, because it's still running, that's why I opened it in its own window thing. So it's running right now. Any change, it notices the change, recompiles all of the files surrounding the change, and then forcibly reloads the browser. And that way I can see the change. I get this feedback loop that is super nice, where I just ran into an issue, I was able to debug and test and go, okay, it says edit. Let's make sure it says save. Let's hit cancel. Let's delete the page. It's not going to actually delete. I'm on localhost. Let's hit edit again. All right, it's still there. Let's hit save. Let's hit edit. Let's hit save. Let's hit edit. Let's hit cancel. Let's expand this all the way. Right, I really hammer on this to ensure that all of the any potential little weird state management sorts of things, which has to do with changes in the code. Right, let's make sure if we go on a super small real estate, and we turn on a fake child page, and then we jump around to another file, and we hit edit. It's still there. We hit save, and we hit edit, and cancel, and we hit delete. Awesome. Everything that appears to be both solving the problem and it worked. It didn't generate any other issues. It still kept to the save and edit connotation. Now, it's still possible that that gets screwed up later. You will also note that mobile, some of those labels may have changed. Nope, they didn't in that case. Good, because I kind of don't want them to change. I sort of just want stuff to expand and collapse. Anyway, all right, it looks like I solved the problem. So now I'm going to close that. I'm going to hit Control C, which cancels that execution, that running program, because when I ran yarn run start, it ran a program, or in this case, yarn run hacks. Now, I could use VS Code, and I could say source control, right? And I can see there are 2 files that changed. And this is very helpful. This is stuff that like I wish was around when I was learning this. This is much more, last like 8 years, 10 years sort of stuff. But you get this really nice diff and to see on the left what you used to have and what you're about to have. This is like the killer reason to be using version control among the security and just your mental health of trying to juggle lots and lots of code amongst lots and lots of people. So VS Code is nice. You could just say, you could click this button, say stage the change, which is me running the command, right? And now I've staged it. That's the equivalent of me running git add space -a, or actually in that case, git adding each individual file. And then I'm going to write a commit message here. And the commit message is very specific. I'm not just going to put whatever like before, because we're actually solving an issue out on GitHub. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the full name of this issue, because that's what we're solving. I'm going to paste it in and make that the commit message and commit it. Now I don't have working tree as far as A versus B because I've committed that. It's no longer staging the changes. I've said, oh, this is what the state of the entire application was, and now this is what it is. So it's still at this point on my computer, even though I did those git commits, it still lives here. That's what this sync changes is saying. So either I could do that here, right? And it says git status on branch master. That means the code, like the version of the code I'm working against as a full-on branch. Your branch is ahead of origin master by 2 commits, meaning it compared the changes out there. It said, hey, last time we took that timestamp, more or less, took that timestamp. This time there were, we'll say 10,000 changes. It's way more than that. And then locally, oh, there's 10,002 changes. So it knows, hey, there's 2 changes you haven't actually pushed up there yet. But you've committed everything locally, and there's a working tree that is clean. That's what's implying locally. This stuff is good to go. So I can either write git push origin master in this case, because it's git, the command is push those changes up there, push it to origin, which is the name of where I'm pushing, right, that relates to a repo, and then master, which is the branch within that repository I'm pushing to. I'm going to get some fun stuff about enumerated objects and deltas and writing objects. And then if I go back to here, we see that this tab is refreshed. Now I could have just clicked sync in there and not done all the pizzazz, but what fun would that be? So close this, and now if I go back into the browser and I hit refresh, we see that the commit was associated to this issue. And now this is going to go, it's actually going to do an automated build in this case. You can see the exact hash of what happened. I can then view it on GitHub. This is why this is a transformative platform. It's leveraging and visualizing Git for you in a way that people can understand, right? So I can see what those changes were, because I usually am not privileged enough to work on a team of 1 pushing code up and then just accepting your changes. You're going to push your code up and other people are going to accept or reject or comment on the code. And so this is all about bridging that human user computer, get the project done for the project manager, make sure that we don't have any bugs, process gobbledygook that is our life. So I normally would click this little button, and we can see there's some code checks. It does some analysis because of the way I've set up my repo. If it builds successfully, it will go out to Vercel. And Vercel is going to redeploy, in this case, actually just this thing. It's called a storybook. But it's going to rebuild our documentation. Now, that one little change, it's not doing anything super useful, but getting that pipeline in place of I do the work, I verify the work locally, I debug, I commit the code, I push it up, I have pipelines in place, which pipeline we'll get into. It's pretty easy stuff, to be perfectly honest, to set in place. You just have to know it conceptually. That pipeline then runs and it builds my code or it tests my code. This is the reality of developing with modern web tools and Git and GitHub in this case. So instead of waiting for that, and like I'm going to get an email, and I'm not just going to sit here and be like, you should wait till I get that email. I'm going to close the issue, which completes the feedback loop. All right, so I see this is now closed. I see my issues ticks down from 248 to 247. Wow, I have a lot of issues. But that's because I added that one right there, right? And now I'm able to go and take the next one and work through it from there. This is the feedback loop of modern web development. So I hope this helped untangle this concept conceptually a bit. There are some more advanced aspects of this, particularly in working in teams when it comes to pull requests and things like that. We'll actually do an exercise in class that gets into some of that, so we can do it around writing Markdown of all things. Bye-bye.